She caught her billionaire husband cheating with his secretary. What happened next? A woman walks into a room and watches her perfect marriage shatter in seconds. Her billionaire husband, with his secretary, in front of everyone. The humiliation is instant, the heartbreak is public, and it looks like the story is over. But then she does something no one expects. She goes to confront the other woman and finds her crying, shaking, terrified, because this isn't an affair. It's a setup. The secretary isn't a rival. She's a hostage. And the cheating is just a cover for something far darker, something illegal, something that could destroy thousands of innocent lives. Now, two women who should be enemies are the only ones who know the truth. But the man they're up against controls money, power, and reputations. So the real question is, when the truth can ruin him, but destroy them, will they risk everything to expose him? Or will fear win and let evil walk free? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The first rays of sunlight hadn't yet touched the Manhattan skyline when Maribel Hart opened her eyes. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the city's lights twinkling like earthbound stars 40 stories below. The silk sheets whispered against her skin as she turned to look at the empty space beside her. James had already left for his morning workout, as usual. Maribel slipped out of bed, her bare feet sinking into the plush carpet. Today was the annual Hart Foundation Gala, an event that would bring together New York's wealthiest to raise money for children's education. She padded to the walk-in closet, running her fingers along the row of designer dresses until she reached the one she'd chosen for tonight, a midnight blue gown that reminded her of the night sky. Money is a tool for service, not a crown for glory, she whispered to herself, remembering her mother's words. Even now, years after moving from their small apartment above the church, where her mother had worked as a secretary, Maribel held on to those lessons of humility and purpose. In the kitchen, the coffee maker hummed to life automatically at 6:30. Maribel found James at the Marble Island, scrolling through his phone while his untouched breakfast grew cold. "Good morning," she said softly, pouring herself a cup of coffee. James barely looked up. "Morning." His voice was flat, distracted. A wrinkle had formed between his eyebrows, the one that appeared when he was stressed about work. "Is everything okay?" She settled onto the stool beside him, the silence between them feeling heavier than usual. "Fine, just busy." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I need to get to the office early. Last-minute details for tonight. Do you want me to come by later? I could help." "No. Need." He cut her off, already walking away. Sarah's handling everything. Sarah, his new secretary. Something twisted in Maribel's stomach, but she pushed the feeling aside. She was being silly, letting her imagination run wild. The day passed in a blur of preparations. By evening, the Grand Plaza Hotel's ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and white orchid centerpieces. Maribel stood near the entrance, greeting guests in her midnight blue gown, her smile warm and genuine despite the knot of unease that had grown throughout the day. James took the stage for his speech, his voice carrying across the crowd. "Tonight isn't about us," he said, his charm turned up to full wattage. "It's about the children who deserve every chance at a better future." Maribel felt pride surge through her. This was the man she'd married, someone who understood the responsibility that came with privilege. But as she watched him step down from the podium, she noticed Sarah hovering nearby in a dress. That seemed a touch too bold for a secretary at a charity event. The evening wore on, and Maribel circulated among the guests, discussing programs and initiatives, but her eyes kept tracking James across the room, noting how he seemed to always end up near Sarah, their heads bent close in conversation. When she saw them slip into a dimly lit alcove behind a massive flower arrangement, her feet carried her forward before her mind could catch up. The sound of her heels on marble was drowned out by the orchestra, but her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She rounded the corner just as James pulled Sarah close, their lips meeting in a kiss that spoke of familiarity, of practice. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Maribel's hand flew to her throat, where a small sound of pain escaped before she could stop it. They sprang apart, but it was too late. James's face drained of colour. Maribel. She took a step backward, then another. Around her she could hear the murmur of voices, the click of camera phones, the rustle of expensive fabric as people turned to stare. The humiliation burned through her like acid, but her mother's voice echoed in her head. Grace under fire is the truest test of character. So Maribel straightened her spine. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She simply turned and walked away, her heels clicking steadily against the marble floor. She collected her wrap from the coat check with hands that barely trembled. The doorman hailed her a taxi, and she slid into the back seat with as much dignity as she could muster. It wasn't until the taxi pulled away from the curb that she allowed the first tear to fall. By the time the elevator carried her up to their apartment, her cheeks were wet, but her breathing remained steady. She stepped into their home, no longer a sanctuary but a museum of broken promises, and stood in the darkness, looking out at the city lights that now seemed cold and distant. Her phone buzzed repeatedly in her clutch, but she didn't check it. Instead, she walked to their bedroom and began to remove her jewelry, placing each piece carefully in its velvet-lined box, the diamond earrings he'd given her for their 10th anniversary, the sapphire pendant that matched her eyes. She looked at herself in the mirror, a woman she barely recognized in a designer dress, tear tracks cutting through her perfect makeup. The morning sun streams through floor-to-ceiling windows, but Maribel Hart barely notices its warmth. She sits motionless at her kitchen table, both hands wrapped around a coffee mug that has long since gone cold. The gleaming granite countertops and sleek appliances feel like props in someone else's life now. Everything familiar has become strange. The scene from last night plays on repeat in her mind. The intimate whispers, the secretive touches, the flash of cameras capturing her husband's betrayal. Her chest tightens each time she relives it. The pristine white tablecloth before her blurs as tears threaten, but Maribel blinks them back. She's done enough crying through the sleepless night. Lord, she whispers into the silence, give me wisdom. Show me what to do. The prayer feels small in the vast emptiness of her kitchen, but it steadies her racing thoughts. After several deep breaths, Maribel stands and walks to the window. 20 stories below, the city pulses with morning traffic. People going about their normal lives, while hers has shattered. But she can't stay here, paralyzed by hurt and confusion. There are questions that need answers. By 10:30, Maribel has showered, dressed in a simple navy blazer and slacks, and driven downtown to the gleaming office tower where her husband's company occupies 3 floors. Her hands tremble slightly as she pulls into the parking garage, but her steps are steady as she crosses the lobby to the elevator. The familiar ding of the elevator reaching the executive floor makes her flinch. How many times has she visited here before, bringing lunch or dropping off forgotten items? Now everything feels different, tainted. The receptionist's eyes widen in recognition. Mrs. Hart, we weren't expecting you today. I need to speak with Elowen Price. Maribel says quietly but firmly. Is she in? The receptionist hesitates, glancing towards the corner office where Maribel knows her husband works. I believe she's at her desk. Should I call first? No need. Maribel forces a small smile. I know where to find her. She walks past the reception desk, her heels clicking against marble floors. Her heart pounds harder with each step. She's prepared herself for this confrontation, prepared to face arrogance, defensiveness, maybe even gloating from the woman who betrayed her trust. Elowen's desk sits in an alcove just outside the corner office. As Maribel approaches, she sees the secretary hunched over her keyboard, shoulders tense. The woman's dark hair falls forward, partially hiding her face. "Miss Price." Maribel says softly, "May we talk privately?" Elowen's head snaps up. The blood drains from her already pale face, leaving her looking ghost white against her charcoal sweater. Her hands freeze over the keyboard. "Mrs. Hart," she whispers. The words come out scratchy, as if her throat is too tight. Yes, of course." Maribel gestures to a small conference room nearby. "Shall we?" Elowen stands on shaky legs, knocking a stack of papers off her desk. She scrambles to gather them, fingers trembling so badly she can barely grip the sheets. This is not the confident home-wrecker Maribel expected. The woman before her seems terrified. Inside the conference room, Elowen sinks into a chair as if her legs won't hold her anymore. Her eyes dart between Maribel and the door like a trapped animal seeking escape. Maribel takes the seat across from her, studying the younger woman's face. Dark circles shadow her eyes, and her lips are chewed raw. "I think we need to discuss what happened last night." Maribel begins carefully. Elowen's hands twist together in her lap. "Mrs. Hart, I'm so sorry. I never wanted... I didn't..." Her voice cracks, and tears spill down her cheeks. Maribel finds herself reaching for the box of tissues on the conference table, sliding it across to Elowen. The simple gesture seems to break something in the younger woman. She covers her face with trembling hands and begins to sob. I can't do this anymore." Elowen chokes out between gasping breaths. "But my sister, I don't know what to do." Maribel's anger and hurt begin to shift, making room for confusion and growing concern. This is not the reaction of someone reveling in an affair. This is raw fear. "Elowen," she says gently, using the woman's first name. "What's really going on here?" The secretary lifts her tear-stained face, meeting Maribel's eyes for the first time. The anguish there is unmistakable. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispers. "You're so kind, and I've wanted to tell someone for months, but he threatened." Fresh tears overwhelm her, and she reaches for the tissues with shaking hands. Maribel waits, her own heart pounding as her mind begins connecting dots she never wanted to see. "Take your time," she says softly. "I'm listening." Elowen draws a shuddering breath, twisting the tissue between her fingers until it shreds. "It started small," she manages. "Just little things at first. Moving numbers around in the books. I knew it was wrong, but he said it was normal business practice. Then it got bigger, and when I tried to quit..." She swallows hard. "He knows about my sister's medical bills, about the experimental treatment she needs. He said he'd make sure she never got approved for the program." The pieces click into place with sickening clarity. Maribel's stomach turns as she realizes what she's hearing. This isn't a simple affair. It's something far darker. The intimacy she witnessed wasn't passion, but power, wasn't desire, but dominance. "The touching, the whispers last night," Maribel says carefully. "That wasn't consensual, was it?" Elowen's shoulders shake as she shakes her head no. The tissue in her hands is completely shredded now. "I'm trapped," she whispers. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Hart. I'm trapped and I don't know how to get out." The silence in the office hung thick between them. Elowen's hands trembled as she gripped a tissue, her mascara leaving dark smudges beneath her eyes. Maribel sat perfectly still, her own pain momentarily forgotten as she watched the younger woman struggle to find words. "I never wanted—" Elowen's voice cracked. She drew in a shaky breath. It wasn't real. None of it was real. Maribel leaned forward slightly, confusion crossing her face. "What do you mean, not real?" "The affair." Elowen could barely whisper the word. "He made me pretend. He said if I didn't—" Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "My mum's sick. She needs expensive treatments. My little sister's still in college. He knows about all of it." The revelation hit Maribel like a physical blow. She gripped the edge of her chair, trying to steady herself. "Are you saying my husband threatened you?" Elowen nodded, her shoulders hunching as if trying to make herself smaller. "It started small. Just staying late at the office, letting people see us working closely together. Then the lunch meetings where he'd sit too close. The whispers started. That's what he wanted." "But why?" Maribel's voice was barely a whisper. "The books." Elowen's fingers twisted the tissue into shreds. "I'm good with numbers. I started noticing things that didn't add up in the charity accounts. Money moving in strange ways. When I asked about it, that's when—" She swallowed hard. "That's when he told me I could either help him or watch my family suffer." Maribel stood abruptly, needing to move. She walked to the office window, staring out at the city below. Her mind raced, fitting pieces together, her husband's recent secretive behavior, the rushed charity events, the way he'd been so insistent on having Elowen handle specific accounts. "How much?" she asked finally, turning back to face the secretary. "Millions." Elowen's voice was hollow. "He's been moving money through the charities, making fake donations, creating shell companies. I've seen the paperwork. He made me help hide it." She looked up at Maribel, her face etched with shame. "Last night at the gala, he planned that. He knew there would be cameras. He said he needed a big distraction because people were starting to ask questions." Maribel's legs felt weak. She sank back into her chair, processing the magnitude of what she was hearing. Her husband hadn't just betrayed their marriage. He'd been using their charities, their good work, to steal money. And he'd terrorized this young woman to cover his tracks. "We can't stay here," Maribel said suddenly, glancing at the office door. "It's not safe to talk about this where he might return." 20 minutes later, they sat in a quiet corner of a small cafe 3 blocks away. Their coffee cups sat untouched between them as Elowen continued to explain, her voice stronger now that they were away from the office. "I kept copies," she said quietly, "of everything I could. The real numbers, the fake accounts, the transfers. I was so scared. But I thought maybe someday—" She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, seeking warmth. "I never thought you'd come talk to me. I thought you'd hate me." "I did for a moment," Maribel admitted. "But something felt wrong from the start. The way you looked last night, it wasn't the look of someone having a secret romance. It was the look of someone trapped." Elowen's eyes filled with tears again. "I'm so sorry. Your kindness. I don't deserve it. What I did—" "What was done to you?" Maribel corrected gently. "There's a difference." She reached across the table and covered Elowen's cold hand with her own warm one. "You're not alone anymore." The younger woman stared at their joined hands, then looked up with hesitant hope. "What do we do now?" Maribel thought for a moment, her face set with quiet determination. "First, we need to be careful. If my husband realizes we're talking, he might panic. Can you get those copies you mentioned somewhere safe?" Elowen nodded. "They're already in a secure place. I can access them, but—" "Good." Maribel squeezed her hand. "We need time to plan our next steps carefully. Can you meet me again tonight? Somewhere private where we can talk more? Yes, Elowen said, sitting up straighter. I know a place. There's a small coffee shop near my apartment. It's open late and the owner's very kind. She lets me sit for hours sometimes when I can't face going home. Perfect. Maribel pulled out her phone and they exchanged numbers. 7 o'clock. Elowen nodded, then hesitated. Mrs. Hart, thank you. For listening. For believing me. I've been so scared for so long. Call me Maribel, she said softly. And thank you for being brave enough to tell me the truth. We'll figure this out together. They parted ways outside the cafe, each heading in different directions, but both feeling less alone than they had that morning. The weight of secrets still pressed heavy, but now it was shared between them, making it somehow more bearable. As Maribel walked home, her mind was already working, planning, considering their options. Her husband had underestimated them both, his wife and his secretary. He'd never expected them to join forces, to find strength in each other. She lifted her face to the afternoon sun, drawing in a deep breath. For the first time since the previous night's humiliation, she felt something like hope stirring in her chest. The sun was setting when Elowen arrived at Maribel's apartment building, clutching her worn leather messenger bag close. Her hands shook slightly as she pressed the elevator button for the top floor. The lift felt exposed, all glass and chrome, making her reflection look small and pale against the darkening city skyline behind her. Maribel opened the door before Elowen could knock. Come in quickly, she said, ushering the younger woman inside. She double-checked the hallway before closing and locking the door. The apartment was beautiful but not showy. Warm colors, comfortable furniture, family photos on the walls. Elowen noticed fresh coffee brewing and papers spread across the dining room table. I've been going through our personal accounts, Maribel explained, leading them to the table. I wanted to see what else I might have missed. Elowen set her bag down and began pulling out folders. Her hands steadied as she fell into the familiar routine of organizing documents. I tried to keep everything in order, she said. By date and account number, the red tabs mark where I first noticed irregularities. They sat side by side, spreading papers across the polished wood surface. Elowen pointed to a series of bank statements. See these transfers? They look legitimate at first glance, donations to the Children's Hospital Building Fund. But when you trace them... She pulled out another document. They get routed through these shell companies, then divided into smaller amounts. Some goes to offshore accounts, some gets invested in fake construction projects. Maribel leaned in, studying the numbers. The amounts are huge. And that's just one scheme, Elowen said quietly. There's more. She reached into her bag again, retrieving a USB drive. Email threads, meeting recordings, bank alerts I was supposed to delete but saved copies of instead. Maribel's laptop sat ready. As they went through the digital files, her face grew increasingly grave. These pension fund accounts, these are people's life savings. I know. Elowen's voice cracked. When I realized what was happening to them, I started having panic attacks. All those retirement accounts, church, building funds, charity endowments, he's been stealing from everyone who trusted him. Show me everything, Maribel said firmly. Every detail. For the next 2 hours, they pieced together the full scope of the fraud. Elowen explained how she'd first noticed discrepancies in the accounting, how she'd tried to question them only to be shut down with veiled threats against her family. She showed Maribel the warning emails she'd received when she'd attempted to flag suspicious transactions. He knew exactly where to apply pressure. Elowen explained, pulling up an email thread. My mother's medical bills, my sister's student loans. He made it clear he could make things very difficult for them. Maribel read through the messages, her jaw tight. And then he forced you to play the role of mistress as a diversion. He said people were starting to ask questions. He needed a scandal, something for the gossip columns to focus on instead of the finances. Elowen wrapped her arms around herself. I felt so dirty, especially knowing what it would do to you. You were trying to protect your family, Maribel said gently. The shame belongs to him, not you. They continued working as night fell outside the wide windows. The stack of evidence grew. Forged documents, manipulated accounts, false tax records. The more they uncovered, the more staggering the scope became. All these people, Maribel whispered, looking at a list of affected accounts. Teachers, nurses, church congregations, they trusted him with their futures. I should have found a way to stop it sooner, Elowen said, her voice thick with guilt. No. Maribel turned to face her. You did what you could. You kept records. You saved evidence. And now you're here, helping make it right. Elowen met her eyes, seeing not judgment but understanding. What do we do next? Maribel stood, walking to the window. The city lights sparkled below, but they seemed colder now, less welcoming. We need help, she said, finally. Professional help, legal, financial, people who can protect us and know how to handle this properly. He has so many connections, Elowen worried. Lawyers, bankers, politicians. Then we'll have to be very careful who we trust. Maribel turned back to the room. First, we pray, for wisdom, for protection, for guidance. Elowen nodded, surprising herself with how much she wanted that. They joined hands across the table. Dear Lord, Maribel began softly, we come to you in a dark hour, seeking your light. Protect us as we try to right these wrongs. Guide us to those who can help. Give us courage to face what's ahead. And please, watch over all those whose lives have been affected by these crimes. Amen. Amen, Elowen whispered. They carefully packed away the documents, Elowen storing them securely in her bag. At the door they hugged, a brief, fierce embrace between two women who'd begun the day as strangers and ended it as allies. After Elowen left, Maribel moved through her apartment, checking each lock twice. For years, these locks had represented privacy, comfort, luxury. Now they felt like fragile barriers against a world that had suddenly become much more threatening. She found herself wishing they were stronger. In the kitchen, she poured out their cold, forgotten coffee and washed the mugs, her movements mechanical as her mind raced through everything they'd discovered. The magnitude of her husband's crimes felt overwhelming. This wasn't just about their marriage anymore. It was about hundreds, maybe thousands of innocent people whose lives would be devastated when the truth came out. She dried her hands and walked to the windows, looking out at the glittering city. Somewhere out there, her husband was probably at his club, drinking expensive scotch, believing his secrets were safe. She pressed her palm against the cool glass, watching her breath fog the surface. Moving to each door one final time, she turned the locks, testing their strength. For the first time in her life, the soft click of the mechanisms engaging filled her, not with a sense of security, but with fear. Sunlight crept through Maribel's kitchen windows as she spread financial documents across her dining room table. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the first charity ledger, its leather cover cool against her fingers. The familiar logo of the Heart Foundation stared back at her, once a symbol of hope, now tainted with suspicion. Her phone buzzed. It was Elowen. "I'm in the office early," Elowen whispered. "He's not here yet. I've started copying the internal records from his private server." "Be careful," Maribel said softly. "Don't let anyone see what you're doing." "I won't. I've been doing this job long enough that no one questions me accessing files anymore." Maribel turned back to the ledgers, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Numbers swam before her eyes, donation amounts, dates, recipient organizations. She'd seen these books dozens of times before at board meetings, but now she was looking at them differently. Every entry could hide a lie. She created a spreadsheet, methodically entering data and flagging suspicious patterns. 3 hours passed in focused silence, broken only by the gentle tapping of her keyboard and the occasional sip of now-cold coffee. At 11:30, Elowen called again. "I found something," she said, her voice shaking. "There's a pattern of transfers to offshore accounts. They're disguised as operational costs for international aid projects, but the receiving organizations don't exist." Maribel's stomach clenched. "How much?" "Millions," Elowen whispered. "And that's just what I can see from last year. Send me what you have, carefully." By early afternoon, Maribel's eyes were burning from staring at numbers. She stood up to stretch, walking to her kitchen window. The city sprawled below, people going about their normal lives, unaware that just floors above them, 2 women were uncovering a web of lies that could shatter hundreds of those lives. Her phone chimed with an email from Elowen. Opening the attached files, Maribel's breath caught. There they were. Shell companies with similar names to legitimate charities, careful transfers that looked normal at first glance, but led to dead ends when traced. "Oh, Thomas," she whispered to the empty room. "What have you done?" She thought of all the people who had trusted them. Elderly church members who had donated their savings, families who had contributed to scholarship funds, small businesses that had sponsored their events. The weight of their betrayal pressed against her chest like a physical thing. At 4:30, Elowen arrived at Maribel's apartment, clutching her laptop bag close. Her face was pale, but her eyes were determined. "Look at this," she said, pulling out a stack of papers. "These are the original donation records compared to what was reported to the board. The differences are small, enough to miss individually, but when you add them up..." They worked side by side at the dining table, creating a timeline of fraudulent transactions. The setting sun cast long shadows across their work when Maribel's phone rang. Thomas's name flashed on the screen. Elowen froze. Maribel took a deep breath and pressed record before answering. "Darling," Thomas's voice was smooth as honey. "I've been thinking about you all day. I know I hurt you, and I'm so sorry." Maribel's hand tightened on the phone. "It's been difficult," she managed to say. "Let me make it up to you. What happened with Elowen, it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. You know you're the only one who matters to me." Elowen's face flushed with anger, but she remained silent, scribbling on a notepad. "Ask about the foundation." "I've been worried about the foundation too," Maribel said carefully. "After everything that happened at the gala..." "The foundation is fine," Thomas said quickly. "Everything is running perfectly. You don't need to concern yourself with that. Let's focus on us. Have dinner with me tomorrow night. The new French place on 5th? "That would be nice." Maribel lied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'd like that." After more smooth words and false promises, she ended the call. Her hands were shaking as she stopped the recording. "He's scared," Elowen said quietly. "He's trying to control the situation." Maribel nodded, staring at her phone. "He knows something's wrong. He's never this apologetic unless he's worried." They looked at the evidence spread across the table, proof of years of systematic fraud and deception. The apartment felt suddenly vulnerable, its walls of glass exposing them to the darkening sky. "We should make copies of everything," Elowen said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Keep them in different places, just in case." Maribel met her eyes, seeing her own fear reflected there. They both understood now. They weren't just uncovering a scandal. They were putting themselves in danger. Yet neither woman moved to pack up the documents or walk away. I'll get a safety deposit box tomorrow, Maribel said firmly. We'll need somewhere secure to store all of this. Alawan nodded, turning back to her laptop. They worked in silence as night fell over the city, their faces illuminated by screen glows and desk lamps. Each new piece of evidence they uncovered was another weight on their shoulders, another reason they couldn't stop. The truth had become both their burden and their purpose. Morning light filtered through the windows as Maribel carefully typed out the email. Her fingers hovered over each key, double-checking every word. Beside her, Elowen read aloud from her research notes. Rowan Delacroix, 3 major corruption investigations in the past 5 years, perfect track record protecting sources, known for thorough fact-checking and ethical reporting. Maribel nodded, continuing to type. Mr. Delacroix, we have evidence of extensive financial fraud involving charitable organizations, multiple years, millions of dollars, need discretion and expertise, can meet today. They used a secure email service Alawan had found, following careful instructions to protect their identities. The reply came faster than expected, just 30 minutes later. 7 p.m., Blue Moon Diner, corner booth. Bring sample documents only. R. The Blue Moon, Elowen said softly. That's smart, always busy but not crowded, easy to spot if anyone's watching. They spent the next hours methodically organizing their evidence. Maribel created copies of the most damaging documents while Elowen compiled the digital trails. Every few minutes, they glanced at windows and doors, jumping at small sounds. The weight of what they were doing pressed heavily on both women. We should arrive separately, Maribel said as afternoon faded. You go first. I'll follow 10 minutes later. Elowen nodded, carefully placing selected files in her worn laptop bag. Are you sure about this? Once we tell someone else, we're past the point of no return. Maribel replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. These people trusted us with their money, their futures. We have to make this right. At 6:45, Elowen entered the Blue Moon Diner, choosing a seat where she could watch both the door and the street. The familiar smells of coffee and grilled food filled the air, but her stomach was too knotted to even think about eating. Maribel arrived precisely 10 minutes later, wearing simple clothes and carrying a plain black bag. She ordered coffee and sat 3 booths away, not acknowledging Elowen. At 7 sharp, a man in his 40s entered the diner. He wore a worn leather jacket and carried a battered messenger bag. His observant eyes scanned the room carefully before he slid into the corner booth. Without a word, both women gathered their things and joined him. Mr. Delacroix, Maribel said quietly, thank you for meeting us. Rowan's voice was low and steady. Call me Rowan. You've taken good precautions coming here. That's smart. He pulled out a small device and placed it on the table. Signal jammer. Gives us some privacy. Now, show me what you have. With trembling hands, Elowen opened her laptop, while Maribel spread out key documents. They took turns explaining what they'd found, the fake charities, the diverted funds, the elaborate cover-up. Rowan listened intently, taking minimal notes in a strange shorthand. His face remained neutral, but his eyes grew increasingly focused as they laid out the evidence. He asked sharp, specific questions that showed his grasp of financial crimes. This is systematic, he said finally. Professional. How long have you been gathering this? Just 2 days, Maribel admitted. But I've been unwittingly connected to it for years. It's my husband's organization. Rowan's eyebrows rose slightly, the first real expression they'd seen from him. That takes courage. Coming forward against family always does. He turned to Elowen. And you're inside the organization? His secretary, she said softly. He tried to use me as a distraction when things started unraveling. That's how we connected. He nodded, studying more documents. The evidence is solid. Multiple sources, clear paper trails. But you need to understand the risks. People who run frauds this big, they don't just give up when exposed. What do we need to do? Maribel asked. Rowan pulled out a notebook. First, stop collecting evidence immediately. What you have is enough. Any more increases your risk of detection. He wrote down several web addresses. These are secure cloud services. Upload copies of everything, then delete your local copies. Use different services for different batches. He continued with more instructions, using public Wi-Fi, creating emergency plans, establishing code words. His calm competence helped settle their nerves. I'll start background. Work tomorrow, he said. Building the story framework, verifying key details. Give me 3 days. Don't do anything different at work or home. Just normal routines. What happens after 3 days? Alawan asked. I'll have a better timeline then. Story like this, we need to be thorough. Get ahead of the denials and counterattacks. He looked at them both seriously. Once this starts, it moves fast. Are you both ready for that? Maribel thought of all the people who had trusted them with their charitable donations. Yes. Alawan straightened her shoulders. Yes. Rowan packed away his notes. Good. You're doing the right thing. Remember that when it gets hard. He gave them each a burner phone. Emergency only. Numbers are programmed in. Check signal every morning, 9 a.m. 1 ring only. They left separately. Rowan first, then Alawan, finally Maribel. The night air felt cleaner somehow, the weight on their shoulders lighter. They had an ally now, someone who knew how to navigate these dangerous waters. Back in her apartment, Maribel looked out at the city lights. For the first time since discovering the truth, she felt something close to hope. They weren't alone anymore. They had a plan, a path forward. Justice felt possible. She carefully began following Rowan's instructions for securing their evidence, her movements precise and focused. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they had taken the first real step toward making things right. The morning sun streamed through Maribel's apartment windows as she nursed her 3rd cup of coffee. Her phone buzzed against the kitchen counter, making her jump. An unknown number. Her hand trembled slightly as she answered. Mrs. Hart, this is Agent Lucienne Ward with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The voice was calm and professional. We've received some concerning information regarding your husband's business practices. Would you be willing to meet with us today? Maribel's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. Yes, of course. I've been expecting your call. Would 2 o'clock work for you? We have a neutral location. The Madison Building downtown, Suite 412. After confirming the details, Maribel immediately called Alawan. They contacted me, she said softly. The FBI wants to meet this afternoon. Oh my goodness. Alawan's voice quivered. Is this really happening? It is. Can you get away from the office? Yes. I'll say I have a doctor's appointment. Alawan paused. I'm scared, Maribel. Me too, but we're doing the right thing. We'll face this together. The Madison Building lobby felt cool and impersonal, all glass and steel. Maribel and Alawan sat close together on a sleek leather bench, waiting. At exactly 2 o'clock, a man in a crisp navy suit approached them. Mrs. Hart, Miss Price, I'm Agent Ward. His handshake was firm but gentle, his eyes kind behind wire-rimmed glasses. Please follow me. The office suite was plain but comfortable, with soft lighting and landscape paintings on the walls. Agent Ward gestured to a small conference room where a court reporter sat ready with her stenography machine. I know this is difficult, Agent Ward said, taking a seat across from them. But your courage in coming forward is admirable. Everything you say will be recorded and treated as a sworn statement. Take your time, and if you need a break, just let me know. Maribel went first, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. She described the charitable foundation's structure, the irregular transfers she'd noticed, the way her husband deflected questions about finances. The typing sounds from the court reporter's machine filled the quiet pauses. "And the incident at the gala?" Agent Ward prompted gently. "Can you tell me about that?" Maribel's cheeks flushed, but she held her head high. It was staged, a distraction. He wanted everyone focused on a scandal instead of his books. Elowen's testimony followed, her words careful and precise despite her trembling hands. She detailed the coercion, the threats against her family's small business, the paper trail of fraudulent transactions she'd been forced to process. "He said no one would believe me," Elowen whispered. "That I was already complicit, that I'd go to jail too." Agent Ward leaned forward. "Miss Price, you're doing the right thing by coming forward now. That counts for a lot." For over 3 hours, they worked through the evidence. Agent Ward took detailed notes, occasionally asking for clarification, but never rushing them. His calm presence helped steady their nerves. "We'll need to review everything thoroughly," he said finally, "but this is exactly what we needed to move forward. You've both shown tremendous courage." The court reporter finished her work and left quietly. Agent Ward handed each woman his card. "Call me directly if you notice anything suspicious, day or night." "What happens now?" Maribel asked. "We'll work as quickly as we can, but these cases take time to build properly. In the meantime, go about your normal routines as much as possible. Try not to do anything that might raise suspicion." Elowen twisted her hands in her lap. "Are we in danger?" Agent Ward's expression turned serious. "We have no direct evidence of physical threats, but it's good to be cautious. Stay aware of your surroundings. Trust your instincts. If anything feels wrong, call me immediately." They gathered their belongings and rode the elevator down in silence. The lobby felt different now, exposed. Through the glass doors, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk. "I'll drive you home," Maribel offered, reaching for her keys. They stepped outside into the warm air. Elowen suddenly grabbed Maribel's arm, her fingers digging in. Half a block away, a black SUV with tinted windows sat idling. The same vehicle Maribel's husband's security team always used. "Don't react," Maribel whispered, forcing herself to keep walking at a normal pace. "Just keep moving." Her car was parked in the opposite direction. Every step felt like an eternity as they moved away from the SUV, fighting the urge to run. Maribel's keys jingled slightly in her shaking hand as she pressed the unlock button. They slipped into the car, and Maribel started the engine with unsteady fingers. In her rearview mirror, she could still see the black SUV, waiting. The weight of what they'd just done, and what might come next, pressed down on them both. "They followed us," Elowen said softly, her face pale. "They know." Maribel gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to steady her breathing. The relief they'd felt just minutes ago in Agent Ward's office evaporated, replaced by a cold knot of fear. The safe, predictable world they'd known seemed to be dissolving around them with each passing moment. For several long seconds they sat in silence, both staring straight ahead. Finally, Maribel put the car in drive. "We can't stay here," she said, quietly. "Hold on." Maribel stared at her phone's black screen in disbelief. She pressed the power button again, but nothing happened. With trembling fingers, she tried her credit card at the corner store. Declined. Her debit card, too. Walking home, 3 separate legal offices had called, leaving stern voicemails about cease and desist orders. In her kitchen, she pulled up her banking app on her laptop. Account access temporarily restricted. Flashed across the screen in bold red letters. Her stomach clenched as she clicked through each account, Checking, savings, investment portfolio, all frozen. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. You have no idea what you've started. A gruff voice warned before hanging up. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them away. This was exactly what Agent Ward had warned them might happen. She wouldn't let fear win. Her doorbell rang, making her jump. Through the peephole, she saw Elowen's pale face. She quickly opened the door. "They're going after Tommy!" Elowen burst out, her voice shaking. She clutched her phone like a lifeline. "The coffee shop. They've launched a full audit. The IRS just showed up without warning. He called me crying." Maribel guided her friend to the couch. "Breathe, sweetie. Tell me everything." Tommy said men in suits appeared right at closing time. They're demanding 3 years of receipts, threatening daily fines. Elowen's hands trembled. That shop is everything to him. He worked so hard after Dad died to keep it going. He has a family to support. Your brother's books are clean, though, right? Of course, but they'll find something if they want to. Make-up violations. Tommy can't afford expensive lawyers. Elowen's voice cracked. "This is my fault. I never should have dragged my family into this." "No." Maribel's tone was firm. "This is not your fault. This is retaliation, plain and simple. Your brother is being targeted because of what we are doing to expose the truth." Her own phone buzzed again. Another message. "Back off now, or watch everything you care about burn." Maribel showed it to Elowen, whose face went even paler. "They're trying to scare us into silence," Maribel said. "But that just proves how desperate they are." "What about your accounts?" Elowen asked. "All frozen. Credit card's dead. I'm guessing he's trying to cut off my access to legal help." Maribel managed a wry smile. "Good thing I kept some cash hidden away. Old habits from growing up poor." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their situation settling around them. Outside, the city lights flickered on as dusk approached. A siren wailed in the distance. "Maybe." Elowen started hesitantly. "Maybe we should stop. Just for now, until we can figure out how to protect our families." Maribel reached for her friend's hand. "That's exactly what they want. If we back down now, they'll know intimidation works. They'll never stop." "But Tommy's shop, we'll help him, I promise. Agent Ward gave me the number of a legal aid organization that helps whistleblowers. They might be able to help your brother, too." Elowen's phone chimed with a text. She read it and let out a small sob. "Tommy's wife is crying. Their business loans are being called in early. The bank's demanding immediate repayment." Maribel felt anger rising in her chest, replacing her earlier fear. This was what her husband did. Used money as a weapon, crushed people who got in his way. She'd seen it before, but had always looked the other way, telling herself it was just business. "No more," she said firmly. "We're not backing down. The truth matters more than money. The people he's hurt matter more than our comfort." She went to her desk and pulled out Agent Ward's card. "We document everything, every threat, every financial attack, every intimidation attempt. It all becomes evidence." Elowen wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. "You're right. Tommy and his wife, they raised me after Mum and Dad died. I have to protect them by finishing this, not by giving up." Together, they began cataloguing everything that had happened since leaving the federal building. Maribel's frozen accounts, the threatening calls and messages, the surprise audit of Tommy's coffee shop, the called-in loans. "Agent Ward said to expect retaliation," Maribel reminded them both. "This means we're on the right track. We're actually threatening them." "I'm still scared," Elowen admitted. "Me too. But we're not alone anymore." Maribel squeezed her hand. "We have each other. We have Agent Ward and his team. And most importantly, we have the truth." They spent the next hour making calls to Agent Ward, to the legal aid organization, to Tommy and his wife with words of encouragement and promises of help. With each call, their resolve strengthened. As night settled over the city, they sat together in Maribel's living room, two women brought together by circumstances they never could have imagined. Different backgrounds, different lives, united now by a common purpose. "Whatever happens," Maribel said softly, "we see this through. Together." Alawan nodded, her eyes tired but determined. Together. Maribel's morning ritual of coffee and devotional reading was interrupted by a barrage of text messages. Her phone buzzed repeatedly as friends forwarded links to news articles. Her hands shook as she clicked the first one. Hart Industries CEO claims wife's mental instability led to false accusations. The words blurred before her eyes. Beneath the headline was a photo of her leaving the federal building yesterday, looking tired and drawn. The article quoted sources close to the family, describing her supposed history of paranoid behavior and emotional instability. Her phone rang. It was her closest friend, Catherine. "Mari, I'm so worried about you," Catherine said, her voice tight with concern. "Why didn't you tell me you were struggling? James says you've been seeing a psychiatrist for months." "What? That's not true!" Maribel's voice cracked. "Catherine, you know me. I've never—" "The papers say you've been having episodes, imagining things. And that secretary is blackmailing James. It all sounds horrible." Catherine paused. "Maybe you should consider getting help, taking some time away." "None of that is true," Maribel whispered, but Catherine had already hung up. More messages poured in. Some expressed concern, others judgment. A few simply said, "I'm praying for you," which felt more like condemnation than support. By mid-morning, her church prayer chain was buzzing with urgent requests for her mental health. The doorbell rang. Elowen stood there, mascara streaked down her face. "Have you seen—" she started. "Come in." Maribel pulled her inside. "Yes, I've seen it all. They're calling me a gold digger." Elowen's voice trembled. "Saying I seduced him and then tried to extort money to keep quiet. My mum called crying. The church ladies are treating her like she raised a criminal." Maribel guided her to the couch. "We knew this might happen. Remember what Agent Ward said. When cornered, people like James attack reputations first. But it hurts so much." Alawan buried her face in her hands. "Everything they're saying. It's all lies, but people believe it. The local news even interviewed my ex-boyfriend from college who called me manipulative." Maribel's own phone buzzed again. Another news alert. Hart Industries CEO's wife, a history of mental health concerns. The article included quotes from former household staff describing her as erratic and paranoid. "They're trying to discredit us before the investigation goes public," Maribel said quietly. "Make everyone doubt our word against his." They sat in silence for a moment, drawing strength from each other's presence. Finally, Elowen spoke. "I keep thinking about that verse. The truth will set you free. But right now the truth feels like a prison. Maybe the freedom comes later." Maribel squeezed her hand. "Right now we just have to hold on to what we know is real." Throughout the afternoon, the attacks intensified. James gave an emotional interview describing his deep concern for his wife's well-being and how the troubled young secretary had taken advantage of Maribel's fragile state. Social media exploded with opinions and judgment. Former friends texted saying they needed space. Church members who had praised James's generosity now whispered about Maribel's breakdown. Elowen's professional contacts suddenly stopped returning calls. By evening, both women felt completely isolated. They ordered delivery food since neither wanted to face public scrutiny at restaurants. As they picked at their meals, Maribel's phone lit up with Rowan's number. "I've been monitoring the situation," he said without preamble. "The smear campaign is classic misdirection. But here's what matters. The investigation isn't just active, It's expanding. They've found links to other companies, offshore accounts. Your evidence opened up something big. Really? Maribel felt a glimmer of hope. Really? The investigators aren't fooled by character assassination. They're following the money. Just hang in there and keep your heads down. The truth will come out. After hanging up, Maribel relayed the news to Elowen. Some of the despair lifted from her friend's face. So it wasn't for nothing, Elowen said softly. Even if everyone hates us right now. Not everyone. Maribel smiled slightly. We still have each other, and God still knows the truth. They cleaned up dinner and sat together on the couch, drawing comfort from friendship and faith. Outside, reporters still lurked with cameras, their phones still buzzed with cruel messages. But in that quiet moment, they felt a small measure of peace. Want to pray? Maribel asked. Elowen nodded. They clasped hands and bowed their heads, asking for strength to endure, wisdom to proceed, and faith to believe. That truth would ultimately prevail. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. The evening news droned in the background, replaying James's tearful interview about his beloved but troubled wife. But the women barely heard it. They were focused on something deeper, the quiet assurance that doing right mattered more than public opinion, and that God saw beyond the headlines to the truth in their hearts. The morning air felt heavy as Maribel and Elowen made their way through the federal building's security checkpoint. Their heels clicked against the polished floor, echoing in the marble hallway. Agent Ward met them at the elevator, his normally stern expression softened with something like concern. The Financial Crimes Panel is ready for you, he said, leading them to a large conference room. Just remember, tell your story exactly as it happened. Take your time. The room was intimidating. All dark wood and leather chairs. 8 serious-faced individuals sat around, a massive table, laptops open, and papers spread before them. Maribel's throat felt dry as she took her seat beside Elowen. Mrs. Hart. The panel chair began, her voice gentle but firm. Please walk us through when you first noticed discrepancies in the charity accounts. Maribel spoke carefully, describing the irregular transfers she'd discovered. Her voice grew stronger as she detailed the pattern of missing funds, redirected donations, and falsified records. The panel members leaned forward, taking notes intensely. When Elowen testified about the coercion and threats, her hands trembled, but her voice remained steady. She explained how James Hart had systematically isolated her, using her family's vulnerable financial situation as leverage. The room grew still as she described the staged affair, designed to create a scandal that would overshadow any questions about the company's finances. Mid-morning, the testimony took an unexpected turn. The panel began sharing evidence from other victims who had come forward. An elderly woman named Dorothy Matthews was invited to speak. She walked slowly to the front, supported by her daughter. I trusted Hart Industries with my life savings, Dorothy said, her voice wavering. The investment consultant at our church recommended them highly. Now I can barely afford my medications. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I was so ashamed to tell my children. I thought I'd been careful with my money. Maribel's heart clenched. She wanted to go to the woman, to promise her that justice would come, but she remained in her seat, hands clasped tightly in her lap. More victims shared their stories throughout the day. Pastor Michael Chen described how his small congregation had invested their building fund with Hart Industries, believing in James's reputation for Christian business ethics. A local women's shelter had lost their entire emergency fund. Each story hit Maribel like a physical blow, the weight of betrayal growing heavier. During a brief lunch break, Maribel and Elowen found a quiet corner in the building's cafeteria. Neither felt much like eating. I knew it was bad, Elowen whispered, pushing her salad around with a fork. but seeing their faces, hearing their stories. She shook her head, unable to continue. "We're doing the right thing," Maribel said firmly, though her own sandwich remained untouched. "No matter what James does to discredit us, these people deserve the truth." The afternoon session felt endless. By 4 o'clock, Maribel's back ached from sitting, and her voice was hoarse from speaking. The panel had been thorough, covering every detail of the fraud scheme multiple times. They seemed particularly interested in James's network of shell companies and how he had used legitimate charities to mask illegal transfers. As the session finally wound down, the panel chair addressed them directly. "Mrs. Hart, Ms. Price, we understand the personal cost of your testimony today. Our office has been monitoring the public relations situation." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Please know that witness intimidation is a serious crime. If you experience any further harassment, contact Agent Ward immediately." The sun was setting by the time they left the federal building. Maribel's feet hurt, her head throbbed, and exhaustion pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. They took a taxi to her apartment, too tired to risk driving. Inside, the apartment felt like a sanctuary. Maribel locked the door, now a habitual action, and kicked off her shoes. Elowen sank onto the sofa, looking as drained as Maribel felt. "Would you like to stay here tonight?" Maribel offered. "It's been such a long day." Elowen nodded gratefully. "I don't think I could face going home alone right now." They ordered simple takeout, soup and sandwiches, neither having energy for anything more. As they ate, they sat in comfortable silence, processing the day's events. Finally, Maribel spoke. "Those people today, their stories broke my heart, but they also reminded me why we can't give up, no matter what James throws at us next." "I keep thinking about Dorothy Matthews," Elowen said softly. "She reminded me of my grandmother. All those years of careful saving, gone because she trusted the wrong person." Maribel stood, gathering their empty containers. "Should we pray together before bed? I know I need it tonight." Elowen joined her in the living room, where they sat side by side on the plush carpet. The city lights twinkled through the windows, creating a peaceful atmosphere despite the day's heaviness. "Dear Lord," Maribel began, her voice thick with emotion, "we lift up everyone who shared their stories today. Please bring them comfort and restoration. Give us strength to continue speaking truth, even when we're afraid. Help us trust that justice will prevail, even when we can't see the path forward. And protect us," Elowen added quietly, "as we surrender. Control to you. We know this battle is bigger than us." They remained in prayer for several minutes, drawing comfort from the familiar words and the sense of peace that settled over them. When they finally stood, both women felt their spirits lifted, despite their physical exhaustion. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Maribel said as she brought out spare blankets for the sofa, "we know we're doing what's right. That has to be enough." Elowen squeezed her hand in silent agreement. They had chosen truth over comfort, justice over safety. Now they could only trust that their decision would help bring healing to those who had lost so much. The morning dawned cold and grey, matching Maribel's solemn mood as she sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of untouched coffee. The morning news played softly in the background, a familiar anchor's voice providing mundane updates about weather and traffic. She hadn't slept well in days, dark circles under her eyes, testament to the weight of waiting. Her phone buzzed. It was Elowen. "Turn on Channel 8. Elowen's voice trembled. "Right now." Maribel grabbed the remote with shaking hands, changing the channel just in time to see the breaking news banner flash across the screen. The image showed the gleaming glass entrance of her husband's corporate headquarters, where several black SUVs were parked haphazardly near the front doors. Federal agents executed multiple search warrants this morning at Hart Industries, the reporter announced, her voice clear and professional. Sources confirm CEO James Hart is being taken into custody on charges of financial fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Maribel's coffee cup clattered against the saucer. She watched, barely breathing, as the cameras captured her husband being led out in handcuffs. His usual confident stride was gone, replaced by stiff, mechanical steps. His perfectly tailored suit couldn't hide the defeat in his shoulders. "Are you watching?" Elowen whispered through the phone. "Yes," Maribel answered softly. "I'm watching." The scene continued to unfold on screen. More agents emerged, carrying boxes of documents. Her husband's face, usually so carefully composed for cameras, showed raw anger as reporters shouted questions. The empire he'd built on lies was crumbling in real time, broadcast for all to see. Can I come over?" Elowen asked, her voice small. "Please do." 20 minutes later, Elowen arrived at Maribel's apartment, her face pale but her eyes bright. They sat together on the couch, watching as the story dominated every news channel. Details of the investigation emerged in steady waves, the scale of the fraud, the number of victims, the years of deception. Elowen suddenly burst into tears, her whole body shaking. Maribel wrapped an arm around her shoulders, concerned. "These aren't sad tears," Elowen managed between sobs. "I've been so scared for so long, watching over my shoulder, worried about my family, and now..." She wiped her eyes with trembling hands. "Now it's over. He can't hurt us anymore." Maribel felt her own eyes fill with tears. "No, he can't." They watched as financial experts dissected the case on screen. The numbers were staggering. Millions diverted from charitable foundations, pension funds drained, small investors ruined. Maribel thought of all the smiling photos from charity galas, all the speeches about giving back to the community. The hypocrisy made her stomach turn. "Look," Elowen pointed to the screen, where Agent Ward was giving a statement. "This investigation succeeded due to the courage of 2 key witnesses who came forward," he was saying. "Their testimony and evidence were crucial in exposing this massive fraud scheme." Though he didn't name them, Maribel and Elowen exchanged glances. They'd done it. They'd chosen truth over fear, right over easy wrong. As the morning wore on, their phones lit up with messages. Some were from old friends, suddenly, remembering their connection. Others were from journalists seeking comments. They ignored them all, creating a quiet bubble in Maribel's apartment while the outside world churned with the news. "I keep thinking about all those people at the gala," Elowen said softly. "How they whispered and stared. They thought they knew the whole story." Maribel nodded. They saw what he wanted them to see. We all did, for too long. Around noon, Rowan called. "You two holding up okay?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "We're fine," Maribel assured him. "Just processing. The story's going to get bigger," he warned. "Every news outlet in the country is picking it up. But remember, you did the right thing. Both of you." After hanging up, they watched more coverage. The story had indeed spread like wildfire. Financial networks analyzed the scandal's impact. Local stations interviewed shocked employees and charity board members. Social media exploded with opinions and reactions. Maribel saw her husband's face on screen again, this time in his booking photo. The man she'd married, who'd once seemed so strong and certain, looked small and angry. His power, built on deception, had vanished like morning mist in sunlight. "I should feel something more," Maribel said quietly. "Triumph, maybe, or satisfaction. But mostly I just feel tired." Elowen nodded. I know what you mean. It's like waking up from a long nightmare. You're relieved it's over, but you're still shaky from the fear. They ordered lunch but barely touched it, both too wrapped up in watching the story unfold. More details emerged throughout the afternoon. Evidence of offshore accounts, falsified documents, years of systematic fraud. Each revelation confirmed what they'd discovered and reported. Do you regret it? Elowen asked suddenly. Coming to talk to me that day at the office? Maribel thought about that morning that felt so long ago now. How she'd walked into that office expecting one kind of truth and found another, harder one instead. How that conversation had changed everything. No, she said firmly. It was painful, but it was right. Sometimes God puts us in difficult places because that's where we're needed. Elowen wiped fresh tears from her eyes. I was so afraid you wouldn't believe me, that no one would ever believe me. But I did believe you. Maribel squeezed her hand. And now everyone knows the truth. As afternoon faded into evening, the news cycle continued its relentless coverage. They watched his former business partners distance themselves in hastily called press conferences. Charity boards announced emergency meetings. Financial advisors urged calm, while stocks associated with Hart Industries plummeted. It's like watching a house of cards collapse, Elowen observed. Maribel nodded. Built on sand instead of stone. The weight of the day settled over them as darkness fell outside. They'd known this day would come, had worked toward it, but the reality was still overwhelming. The truth they'd fought to expose was now public knowledge, impossible to hide or deny. What happens now? Elowen asked softly. Now we rest. Maribel answered. We did what we had to do. The truth is out. Justice can take its course. They sat together in companionable silence, watching the city lights twinkle through the windows. The worst was indeed over. The fear that had haunted them, the pressure of carrying such heavy secrets, the isolation of their private battle, all of it was finally lifting. Whatever came next, they would face it together, stronger for having chosen courage over comfort, truth over safety. Dawn crept over the city skyline, painting the clouds in soft shades of pink and gold. Maribel stood at her apartment window, a cup of untouched tea growing cold in her hands. Her eyes followed the steady stream of federal vehicles pulling up to her husband's office building. Men and women in dark suits carried boxes and computers out the front doors, loading them methodically into waiting vans. The headlines had been explosive. Financial empire crumbles. CEO arrested in massive fraud scheme. But it was the smaller details that caught at Maribel's heart, the personal stories emerging from behind the numbers. Her phone buzzed. It was Elowen. Are you watching the news? Elowen's voice was steadier now, no longer carrying that edge of constant fear. I can see them from my window. Maribel replied softly. They're still bringing things out. Agent Ward called me this morning. Elowen said. They're starting to trace all the money. They think they can recover most of it. Maribel closed her eyes, remembering the faces of people who had trusted her husband with their life savings. Thank God, she whispered. Throughout the morning, updates rolled in. The federal team had frozen dozens of hidden accounts. Shell companies were being dismantled. Assets were being catalogued. The houses, the boats, the cars bought with stolen money. It felt surreal watching the empire of lies come apart, piece by piece. Around noon, Maribel's doorbell rang. It was a courier with a thick envelope from the Department of Justice. Inside were copies of the first restitution orders. Her hands trembled as she read through the documents. The numbers were staggering, but it was the names that brought tears to her eyes. Familiar names from charity boards and church committees. First Baptist Church, restored in full. She read aloud. Riverside Senior Center Pension Fund, restored in full. Her phone lit up with a text from Elowen. "Turn on Channel 4. Maribel grabbed her remote. The local news was showing elderly couples outside the federal building, some leaning on canes or walkers, tears streaming down their weathered faces as they clutched official letters. "We thought we'd lost everything," a silver-haired woman was saying into the microphone, her husband's arm around her shoulders. "Our whole retirement gone. But now—" She held up her letter with shaking hands. "Now we can sleep at night again." Maribel sank onto her couch, overwhelmed by the impact of what she was seeing. These weren't just numbers on a page anymore. These were real people, real lives that had been saved because she and Elowen had found the courage to speak up. Around 3 o'clock, her building's concierge called up. "Mrs. Hart, there's quite a bit of mail for you." In the lobby, Maribel found several postal bins filled with letters. She brought them up in trips, spreading them across her dining room table. With trembling fingers, she began to open them one by one. "Dear Mrs. Hart," she read, "I don't know if this will reach you, but I wanted to thank you. My grandmother lost her savings in this scheme. She's 83 and was so scared. Today she got word that her money is being returned. You've given her peace in her final years." Another. "Dear Mrs. Hart, our church food bank can keep its doors open because of what you did. God bless you." The words blurred as tears fell. Maribel had to stop reading for a moment, overwhelmed by the outpouring of gratitude. She hadn't done this for recognition. She'd done it because it was right. But these letters showed her the ripple effect of choosing truth over comfort. Her phone rang. It was Elowen again, but this time she was crying happy tears. "My brother just called," she managed to say. "The audit against his business has been dropped. The feds confirmed it was retaliation. He's safe, Maribel. My whole family is safe." Maribel smiled through her own tears. "Are you with them now?" "Yes." Elowen's voice was thick with emotion. "First time I've been home in months. Mum made my favorite dinner. Dad keeps hugging me and telling me he's proud. Even my teenage sister admitted she missed me. I'm so glad, Elowen. You deserve this. You deserve to feel safe." There was a pause. Then Elowen spoke softly. "We both do. You know that, right? You deserve peace, too." Maribel looked around her apartment. At the letters of gratitude, at the news still playing silently on her TV, showing more families receiving restitution, at the sunset starting to paint the sky outside her window in colors that seemed brighter somehow. "I think I'm starting to believe that," she replied quietly. More letters arrived over the next few hours. Churches reporting their missions could continue. Small charities announcing their doors would stay open. Retirement homes confirming their residents' accounts were being restored. Each one was a reminder that doing the right thing, no matter how hard, had ripples that reached further than they could see. As evening settled over the city, Maribel sat in her favorite chair by the window, holding one of the thank you letters. The fear that had gripped her heart for so long was finally beginning to fade, replaced by something that felt a lot like peace. Somewhere across town, she knew Elowen was surrounded by her family, finally free from threats and coercion. They had walked through fire together these past weeks. They had faced threats and isolation and public shame, but they had held on to their faith and their conviction that truth mattered. And now, watching justice unfold and healing begin, they were seeing the fruits of their courage. The letters kept coming. The restitution continued. And with each story of restoration, each thank you note, each grateful tear, both women felt their own hearts healing too. Sunlight streamed through plain white curtains, casting gentle shadows across cardboard boxes scattered throughout Maribel's new living room. The space was smaller, much smaller than her previous high-rise apartment. But as she stood in the center of the room, hands on her hips, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. True peace. The modest 3-bedroom house sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees. Nothing fancy. No doorman, no marble floors, no floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Just a simple home with warm wooden floors that creaked slightly when you walked on them and walls that needed a fresh coat of paint. "I think this box goes in the kitchen," Elowen called out, carefully carrying a container labeled dishes in neat black marker. Her handwriting, even on moving boxes, was as precise as her bookkeeping had been. Maribel smiled, watching her friend navigate through the maze of boxes. "Just set it on the counter. I'll unpack it later." She walked over to help Elowen, who had grown stronger over the past weeks, but still looked tired sometimes. "Why don't we take a break? I made some iced tea." They settled onto the worn couch, a yard sale find Maribel had fallen in love with, and sipped their drinks. Through the window, they could see children riding bikes down the street, their laughter floating in on the spring breeze. "It's so different here," Elowen observed, tucking her legs beneath her. "But good different." Maribel nodded, running her finger along the rim of her glass. "I could have kept the apartment, you know. The court said I was entitled to it." She paused, considering her words. "But every room there held memories I'd rather leave behind. This place—" She gestured around the modest living room. "This is my choice, my fresh start." Elowen's eyes brightened with understanding. "Speaking of fresh starts," she pulled a folded paper from her back pocket. "I got my acceptance letter yesterday. Full scholarship to Georgetown Law's non-profit program." "Oh, Elowen!" Maribel set down her glass and pulled her friend into a tight hug. "I knew you could do it. When do you start?" "Fall semester," Elowen replied, her cheeks pink with pride. "I never thought I'd have the courage to apply, let alone get in. But after everything we've been through—" She smoothed the letter on her lap. "I want to help people who've been taken advantage of. Make sure what happened to all those families never happens again." Maribel reached for her bag and pulled out her own stack of papers. "Actually, I've been working on something too." She spread the documents across the coffee table. Business plans, mission statements, and registration forms. "I'm starting a foundation for ethical finance education and victim advocacy." Elowen leaned forward, scanning the papers with interest. Her eyes widened as she read. "The Second Chance Foundation? That's what we all deserve, isn't it? A second chance." Maribel gathered the papers together carefully. "The foundation will offer free financial literacy programs, legal support for fraud victims, and counseling services. I'm using what's left of my settlement money to fund it." "That's perfect," Elowen whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "All those people who lost their savings. They'll have somewhere to turn." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each lost in thought. Outside, a moving truck rumbled past, and somewhere down the street, a dog barked. "You know," Maribel said finally, "I've been thinking about what my mother used to say about money being a tool, not a treasure." She stood and walked to the window, watching as leaves danced across her small front yard. She was right. All that wealth, all that luxury, it never made me happy. But using it to help others, that feels right. Elowen joined her at the window. "When I first started working at the firm, I thought having access to that kind of money would solve all my problems." She shook her head. "Instead, it almost destroyed everything I cared about. But you chose to do the right thing," Maribel reminded her gently. "Even when it was terrifying." "We both did," Elowen corrected. She pulled another paper from her bag, a thank you letter from one of the elderly couples whose pension had been restored. "I keep this to remind me why we did it." Maribel smiled, remembering the stack of similar letters she'd received. Each one represented a life touched, a wrong made right. The gratitude in those messages humbled her more than any luxury ever had. They spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, and transforming the house into a home. Maribel hung simple curtains and arranged family photos on the walls. Elowen organized the kitchen with the same attention to detail she'd once applied to spreadsheets. As evening approached, they ordered pizza and sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by half-empty boxes and new possibilities. "I have my first foundation meeting next week," Maribel mentioned between bites. "We're starting small, but I have big dreams for what we can accomplish." Elowen nodded enthusiastically. "And I start my pre-law summer courses next month. My brother's even helping me find an apartment near campus." "How is your family doing?" Maribel asked softly, knowing how much pain the scandal had caused them. "Better," Elowen smiled. "The audit on my brother's business was dropped, and my parents—" She paused, emotion catching in her throat. "They're just happy to have me back. Really back, not just the scared version of me they'd been seeing." Maribel reached across and squeezed her hand. "You're one of the strongest people I know, Elowen. Georgetown Law won't know what hit them." They laughed together, the sound echoing off the bare walls of the new house. It wasn't the polished laugh of society parties or charity galas, but something real and warm and healing. Later, as they finished unpacking the last box of kitchen items, Maribel found herself humming, something she hadn't done in years. The simple tune filled the modest kitchen, mixing with the sounds of crickets beginning their evening song outside. "What's that you're humming?" Elowen asked, carefully arranging mugs on the open shelving. "Amazing Grace," Maribel replied softly. "It was my mother's favorite hymn. She used to sing it when she was happy." She placed a stack of plates in the cabinet. "I think she would be proud of this, of choosing purpose over privilege." The evening light filtered through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the floor. Both women stood for a moment, taking in the peace of the scene, so different from the chaos and fear they'd lived through just weeks before. "To new beginnings." Elowen raised her water glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," Maribel echoed. "And second chances." Sunlight streamed through the simple cotton curtains of Maribel's new home office. The modest two-bedroom house sat in a quiet neighborhood, worlds away from the glittering high-rise she'd once called home. But here, surrounded by warm wooden furniture and family photos, she felt truly at peace for the first time in months. Maribel sat at her desk, carefully reviewing the final paperwork for the Phoenix Foundation's launch. The name had come to her during a late-night conversation with Elowen. Like the mythical bird, they had risen from the ashes of destruction to create something beautiful and meaningful. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elowen. "Traffic's terrible. Be there in 15, bringing coffee." Maribel smiled, remembering how their relationship had evolved from that first tense meeting in her husband's office. Who could have guessed that the trembling secretary would become her closest friend and strongest ally? The doorbell chimed exactly 15 minutes later. Elowen bustled in, juggling 2 coffee cups and a stack of folders, her cheeks pink from the spring breeze. Her whole demeanor had changed in recent months. Gone was the haunted look in her eyes, replaced by a quiet confidence that grew stronger each day. "I can't believe we're really doing this," Elowen said, setting down their drinks. She looked professional and polished in a navy blazer, her student ID from her non-profit law program clipped to the pocket. "Sometimes I wake up thinking it was all a dream." "Not a dream," Maribel replied, squeezing her friend's hand. "Though sometimes I wish the bad parts had been." They settled into their familiar routine, spreading documents across Maribel's desk. The Foundation's mission statement, carefully crafted over countless hours, lay at the center. Empowering women to recognize, resist, and report corporate coercion and fraud. The hotline goes live next week, Elowen said, pulling up the schedule on her tablet. We've got 20 trained volunteers ready to take calls, and the secure reporting system is in place. Maribel nodded, her throat tight with emotion. I keep thinking about how many women might be out there, just like you were, scared, alone, thinking they have no choice. But now they'll have somewhere to turn. Elowen's voice was firm. And someone who understands exactly what they're going through. They'd designed the Foundation's programs based on their own experience, legal support, financial counseling, and most importantly, a community of survivors who could offer hope and understanding. Elowen's role as program director meant she could speak directly to women facing similar situations, sharing her story to help them find their courage. The support group starts tonight. Maribel remembered, checking her calendar. Are you nervous about speaking? Elowen straightened her shoulders. A little. But if my story helps even one person feel less alone, it's worth it. They worked through the morning, finalizing details for the Foundation's public launch event. It would be nothing like the glittering galas of Maribel's past, just simple refreshments, honest conversations, and a chance for supporters to learn about their mission. Around noon, they took a break, sharing lunch at Maribel's small kitchen table. Sunlight danced across the worn wooden surface as they talked about Elowen's classes and Maribel's recent speaking engagement at a corporate ethics conference. Remember that first night we really talked? Elowen asked, stirring her soup thoughtfully. When you invited me to your apartment and we spread all those documents across your fancy dining room table? Maribel nodded. I was so angry at first, thinking you were having an affair with my husband. But then I saw how terrified you were, and something in my heart just shifted. You could have hated me, Elowen said softly. Most people would have. Instead, you listened. You believed me. You helped me find the strength to fight back. You had that strength all along. Maribel corrected her. You were gathering evidence before I even knew anything was wrong. You just needed someone to stand with you. They shared a look of understanding that went beyond words. Their shared trauma had forged a bond stronger than friendship. They were sisters now, bound by something deeper than blood. After lunch, they returned to work, reviewing applications from women seeking the Foundation's help. Each story struck close to home. Pressure to cover up financial misconduct, threats against family members, the isolating fear of being trapped in an impossible situation. Listen to this one, Elowen said, her voice gentle. She's an accountant at a real estate firm. They're forcing her to manipulate the books by threatening to fire her sister, who has medical bills she can't pay without insurance. Maribel felt her heart ache. Just like they threatened your brother's business. Exactly. Elowen made some notes on the file. I'm meeting with her tomorrow. We can offer legal support through the Foundation, and I know a counselor who specializes in workplace trauma. They worked through the afternoon, their easy partnership a testament to how far they'd come. When Elowen left for her evening class, Maribel watched her friend drive away, marveling at the unexpected gifts that had emerged from such darkness. Later that night, as Maribel prepared for bed in her simple but comfortable home, she thought about the Foundation's motto, painted in elegant script on the office wall. Through truth to freedom. The words had come from one of their many late-night conversations, when they were still gathering courage to face what lay ahead. Her phone chimed with a message from Elowen. Just finished class. The professor used our case as an example of ethical whistleblowing. Still feels surreal. Thank you for everything. Love you, sister. Maribel smiled, typing back. So proud of you. We're changing lives together. Love you too, sister. She set her phone aside, feeling grateful for the strange and beautiful way life had brought them together. From the ashes of betrayal and fear, they had built something meaningful, not just the foundation, but a bond that would last a lifetime. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new women seeking help, new battles to fight. But they would face it all together, two unlikely sisters standing strong against the darkness, helping others find their way to light. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the conference center auditorium, casting warm strips of light across the packed rows of attendees. The National Ethics and Corporate Responsibility Conference buzzed with anticipation as professionals from across the country settled into their seats. In the front row, Eloan Price smoothed her simple navy blazer and smiled, her heart swelling with pride as she watched Maribel Hart take the stage. Maribel looked different now. Gone were the designer suits and elaborate jewelry that had once been her armor. Instead, she wore a modest cream blouse and classic black pants, her dark hair pulled back in a simple bun. But it was her presence that truly captured attention, a quiet confidence that came from somewhere deeper than wealth or status. "Good morning," Maribel began, her voice steady and clear. "1 year ago I stood in a glittering ballroom surrounded by false promises and hidden lies. Today I stand before you with something far more valuable: truth." Eloan watched as the audience leaned forward, drawn in by Maribel's gentle authority. She remembered their journey, the late nights poring over documents, the tears, the prayers, the moments when fear had threatened to overwhelm them both. But sitting here now, those memories had lost their sting. "Many of you probably read about my story in the headlines," Maribel continued, her hands relaxed on the podium. "The wealthy socialite whose husband's fraud scheme collapsed, the corporate scandal that shook the financial world. But headlines don't tell the whole story. They don't capture the elderly couple who lost their life savings, or the small church whose building fund vanished overnight. They don't show you the faces of the real people affected by corporate greed." A reverent hush fell over the room. Eloan noticed several people dabbing at their eyes, moved by Maribel's words. She thought about how far they'd both come, from that first terrifying conversation in the office to this moment of purpose and peace. "But I'm not here to dwell on the darkness," Maribel said, her smile genuine and warm. "I'm here to share what I learned about the power of choosing right over easy, about finding strength in vulnerability, about how crisis can become opportunity when we let it transform us instead of break us." She went on to describe the foundation they'd created, the Ethical Finance and Advocacy Center, which now helped hundreds of women trapped in similar situations. Their programs offered legal support, counseling, and career rehabilitation. But more than that, they offered hope, living proof that starting over was possible. "My greatest blessing through all of this," Maribel's voice softened with emotion, "was finding an unexpected sister." Her eyes met Eloan's in the audience. "Someone who showed me that true courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right even when you're terrified." Eloan felt tears spring to her eyes, remembering how Maribel had shown her nothing but compassion that day in the office when she'd expected judgment and anger. Their friendship had become a testament to the healing power of grace. "Today I no longer live in a penthouse apartment," Maribel continued with a light laugh. "I drive a used car, I shop at regular stores, and I've never been happier, because I've learned that real wealth isn't about what you have. It's about who you become when everything is stripped away." The audience nodded in understanding. Eloan noticed several corporate executives in the crowd taking notes, genuinely moved by Maribel's message of ethical leadership and personal integrity. "The foundation we've built isn't just about preventing fraud," Maribel explained. "It's about creating a new culture of corporate responsibility, It's about reminding people that behind every spreadsheet, every transaction, every bottom line, there are real human lives at stake. She shared stories of their successes, women who'd found the courage to speak up, companies that had reformed their practices, victims who'd received justice and restoration. Each story illustrated not just what they'd accomplished, but what was possible when people chose to stand for truth. I used to think strength meant never showing weakness, Maribel admitted. I thought faith meant never questioning. I thought love meant never setting boundaries. But I've learned that real strength often looks like vulnerability. Real faith survives doubt. And real love includes the courage to say no to what's wrong. Elowen watched as Maribel's words resonated through the room. The woman on stage wasn't bitter or angry about her past. She'd transformed it into wisdom, into help for others, into a mission bigger than herself. So yes, I lost what looked like everything, Maribel concluded, her voice full of quiet joy. But I gained what matters most: purpose, authenticity, and true friendship. I found my voice, I discovered my calling, and I learned that sometimes our greatest setbacks can become our greatest opportunities for growth. The applause was immediate and heartfelt. As people rose to their feet, Elowen saw tears on many faces, not from sadness, but from recognition of deep truth. Maribel's story had touched something universal in them all. When Maribel stepped down from the stage, Elowen met her with a warm hug. No words were needed between them. They'd walked through fire together and emerged stronger. Their past no longer cast shadows over their present. Instead, it had become the foundation for a future neither could have imagined a year ago. Around them, conference attendees began to gather, eager to learn more about their foundation's work. Elowen watched as Maribel graciously answered questions, her natural warmth drawing people in. The shame and scandal that had once threatened to define them had been transformed into a platform for positive change. As they stood together, fielding questions and sharing their vision for ethical corporate culture, both women felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had not only survived their crisis, they had used it to create something beautiful and meaningful. Their story had become a beacon of hope for others, proving that even the darkest circumstances could lead to unexpected light. The afternoon sun continued to pour through the windows, painting everything in warm gold. Elowen caught Maribel's eye, and they shared a knowing smile. They were no longer victims or whistleblowers or scandal survivors. They were simply themselves, two friends who had chosen courage over comfort, truth over safety, and found freedom in the process. The late summer breeze rustled through the climbing roses in Maribel's garden, carrying the sweet scent of blooming jasmine across the modest wooden table where she sat with Elowen. Golden evening light filtered through the pergola above them, casting warm shadows on their faces as they shared a simple meal of homemade pasta and fresh bread. Maribel looked around her small but cherished garden, so different from the manicured landscapes of her old high-rise life. Here, wildflowers grew between careful plantings, bees hummed contentedly among the herbs, and a small fountain bubbled peacefully in the corner. It wasn't perfect, some areas needed weeding, and the tomato plants were a bit overgrown, but it was real. It was honest. "I can't believe it's been a year," Elowen said softly, breaking their comfortable silence. She twirled pasta around her fork, her movements relaxed in a way they never had been in the corporate world. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and other times it feels like another lifetime entirely." Maribel nodded, taking a sip of sparkling water from her glass. "I was thinking about that during the conference today, standing there at the podium, looking out at all those faces. It hit me how far we've come from that night at the gala." "You were amazing up there," Elowen said, reaching across to squeeze Maribel's hand. "The way you spoke about transformation without bitterness, it touched everyone in that room. I saw people wiping away tears." A gentle smile crossed Maribel's face. You know what's strange? When I was preparing that speech, I realized I actually feel grateful now. Not for what he did, of course, but for where it led us. To truth, Elowen said quietly. And so much more than that, Maribel replied, breaking off a piece of bread. Remember how scared we were that night we first gathered all the evidence? I barely slept at all. Elowen laughed softly. I jumped at every little noise for weeks. But you know what I remember most? The way you prayed with me that evening, even though you barely knew me. You had every reason to hate me, but instead you showed me such kindness. Because I could see your heart. Maribel said simply. Under all that fear and pain, I could see someone trying to do the right thing, someone who needed an ally as much as I did. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. A cardinal landed on the nearby bird feeder, its bright red feathers catching the light. Look how many lives we've helped through the foundation, Elowen said, her eyes brightening with purpose. Just last week, that group of accounting whistleblowers, when they came to us so frightened and confused, it was like looking in a mirror from a year ago. Maribel nodded. And now they're safe. Their evidence is with the proper authorities, and their families are protected. Each time we help someone else break free from corruption or coercion, it gives more meaning to what we went through. From victims to advocates, Elowen mused. Sometimes I still can't believe I'm actually in law school. Me, the scared secretary who could barely speak up in meetings. And now you're top of your class in non-profit law, Maribel said proudly. You're going to help so many people understand their rights and find their voice. They fell into another comfortable silence, enjoying the peaceful evening and each other's company. A family of sparrows splashed playfully in the fountain, their cheerful chirping filling the air. You know what I'm most thankful for? Elowen said after a while, her voice soft with emotion. This friendship. I never expected to find a sister through all of this. Maribel felt tears prick at her eyes. God works in mysterious ways, doesn't he? When everything was falling apart, he was actually putting something beautiful together. We just couldn't see it yet. Remember that first time we prayed together? Elowen asked. We were asking for protection and wisdom, but what we really received was so much more. We received courage, Maribel reflected. The strength to stand up for truth, no matter the cost. And we found out we were stronger than we ever imagined. The garden grew darker as the sun continued its descent, but neither woman moved to turn on the patio lights. There was something sacred about this moment, sitting in the growing dusk, surrounded by the gentle sounds of nature. Sometimes I drive past the old office building, Elowen admitted. Not because I miss it, but to remind myself how far I've come, how fear doesn't control me anymore. Maribel nodded in understanding. I still have moments when I see a news article about financial fraud, and my stomach drops for a second. But then I remember. We're not powerless anymore. We're actually part of the solution now. And we're not alone, Elowen added. Look at the community we've built through the foundation. All these brave people standing up for what's right, supporting each other. A cool evening breeze swept through the garden, carrying the scent of Maribel's herbs. She pulled her light cardigan closer around her shoulders, feeling deeply content in this simple moment. You know what makes me happiest? Maribel said, looking around her modest but beloved garden. That we both chose this new life. We could have just taken the settlement money and disappeared to some beach somewhere, but instead we chose to stay and help others. To turn our pain into purpose. Elowen agreed, though I wouldn't say no to an occasional beach vacation, she added with a laugh. Maribel joined in her laughter, and the sound carried across the garden, natural and free. How different from the forced social laughter of her old life, always watching her words, always maintaining appearances. I think that's what I'm most grateful for, Maribel said thoughtfully. The freedom to be real, to live with complete integrity, even if it means having less material wealth. But so much more real wealth. Elowen finished. Real friendship, real purpose, real peace. They sat together as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, neither feeling the need to fill the silence with words. The first stars began to appear above them, twinkling through the lattice of the pergola. In the distance, a church bell chimed softly. Thank you, Elowen said suddenly, her voice full of emotion. For believing in me when I could barely believe in myself. For showing me what true strength looks like. Maribel reached across the table and took her friend's hand. Thank you for helping me find my courage, for standing with me when everyone else walked away. Together they sat in the gathering darkness, their hearts full of gratitude, not for what they had lost, but for everything they had found. Unwavering truth, quiet courage, precious friendship, and a future built on the solid foundation of integrity. The garden around them was peaceful, a testament to how beauty can grow from the most unexpected circumstances, if only given the chance to bloom. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.